Doctor Strange 2 references Marvel and Marvel lore more times than Wanda traumatizes her children and the audience. So without further ado, I'm just gonna dive right in and go over every Marvel reference that you might have missed in the Multiverse of Madness. Let's start off with one of the many shocking cameos in the movie, and the moment that Charlize Theron rocks up in the mid-credit scene to take Steven on a new adventure and deal with the incursion that he caused, we can be pretty certain that Charlize is playing Clea. For those who don't know, in the comics, Clea is a half-Faltine, half-dark dimensional mortal sorceress who can naturally fly and hover, and she's actually the niece of Dormammu. You know, that big fella from the first Doctor Strange movie. She is also the lover and future wife of Doctor Strange. So sorry, Christine. So expect to see some romance blossoming between the two in another movie. But arguably most importantly, Clea is actually the one who succeeds Strange as the Sorcerer Supreme. And although Wong is currently the Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU, don't be surprised if Charlize Theron picks up the baton soon. Moving on. The Earth in the MCU was officially christened as Earth 616. 616 is the same number used to identify Marvel Comics' main canon universe, so referencing the number is a nice nod to the continuity of the comics. Seeing as Marvel has already thrown at us talking raccoons, colored stones that can obliterate half of life on Earth, and a blue alien that thinks he's Mary Poppins, there's not much that Marvel can do now to shock us, or even think that things are weird, so when a random Minotaur rocks up in Camartage, we don't really think anything of it. But that Minotaur does have some importance in the comics. Rintrah the Minotaur, who made his first appearance in 1986 as Doctor Strange issue 80, is actually an alien born with a propensity for magic, and while he is a full-fledged sorcerer now, he was at one time Doctor Strange's apprentice. Also, gotta give a quick shout out to Master Hamir, the guy that Strange originally thought was the Ancient One, who also makes an appearance in Multiverse of Madness. The first version we see of Strange is the ponytailed variant who can speak Spanish, and who will later become a zombie. Interestingly though, this Strange is kitted out with a Defender's outfit, which in the comics, Strange created with the Hulk, Namor, and the Silver Surfer before the likes of Daredevil, Luke Cage, and the Red Guardian ended up joining their ranks. Literature has a major influence on the Doctor Strange sequel, in particular the dueling books, the Darkhold, and the Book of Vishanti. The Darkhold is a tomb known as the Book of the Damned, and it was transcribed from dark magic, and it's packed full of evil spells. On the other side of the coin, the Book of Vishanti, or Vishanti depending on who's saying it, is a book of magical power with the ability to grant a sorcerer whatever they require to achieve victory. In the comics, the book was created by the first Sorcerer Supreme, Agamotto, along with the godlike entities known as the Vishanti. Another reference to the comics is the moment that Mordo uses the sands of Nisanti to incapacitate Strange and America Chavez and send them both to sleep. In the comics, the sands of Nisanti also prevents anyone within a certain radius from using magic for a period of 3 minutes. Going back to the Darkhold now, Wanda visits Mount Wundagore to channel the dark magic from the book. In the comics, Mount Wundagore has some significance, as not only is it the location where Chthon wrote the Darkhold, but it's also the home of Marvel villain the High Evolutionary, and it was actually the original birthplace of Wanda and her brother Pietro. Speaking of Chthon, he is actually one of the most powerful elder gods of Earth, although he denigrated into a demonic state. Now, while Chthon does not make an appearance in the movie, the stone golems that approach Wanda on Mount Wundagore and act as her stooges were designed in the demon's image. We said we'd go back to them, and that's because incursions have an important part to play in Marvel lore, and judging by the mid-credit scene, they will likely have a big part to play in the MCU going forward. The 2015 comic event The Secret Wars put incursions front and center, and with the Secret Wars being hinted at for some time in the MCU, this could perhaps serve as the basis for our next Avengers level threat, and it could also mean we see some old faces return, such as RDJ and Chris Evans, or have some fan casting happen for the first time, like Tom Cruise as Iron Man, but of course, I am just speculating. Moving on. In the Multiverse of Madness, Stephen proves to Sinister Strange that he is a true variant by recounting the story of his sister who died in a frozen lake when they were young. His sister, who's called Donna because of course she is, because Donna sounds like Doctor, also died in the comics by drowning. Multiverse of Madness ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger, with Stephen developing his very own third eye. Just like the one sported by the creepy Sinister Strange, the third eye is a reference to the comics, where it was the true eye of Agamotto, and it helps Stephen resist and fight back against the dark arts. However, with its surprise inclusion at the end of the movie, could it potentially have more nefarious meanings? And could we perhaps see an evil Strange like we saw in What If? Now, seeing as she was integral to the plot, it's unlikely that you missed America Chavez, but if you are unfamiliar with the character, here's a little bit of a backstory. Chavez first appeared in Vengeance issue number 1 in September 2011 before joining the Young Avengers and then later starring in her own ongoing series. Along with her ability to travel across the multiverse in the comics, she also possesses the power of flight, superhuman strength, speed, longevity, and durability. She is also the first LGBTQ member of the Latin American community to star in their own series. Speaking of America, one of the creatures trying to capture her was the monster Gargantos, who strongly resembles the Doctor Strange adversary Shumagorath, but was renamed due to copyright reasons. However, the extra reference to Marvel is that the whole scene with Gargantos and America is reminiscent of the scene in Spider-Man 2 involving Doc Ock and Aunt May. I mean, even the building is similar. And seeing as Raimi directed both movies, we would not be surprised if that was a nod to his classic movie. Another reference to that fight is the axe that Strange wields, which looks a lot like the axe of Angarruumus. In the comics, the axe of Angarruumus was a very ancient and powerful weapon which was found by Doctor Strange in a witch's crypt in the center of the moon. Again, during the fight with Gargantos, there are more references to the comics through the spells performed by Strange and Wong. The spell with giant disembodied monster hands is likely a reference to the demons of Danak, while the spell, the Chains of the Kraken, which does exactly what it says on the tin, was also summoned during combat. Later on, as Strange tries to protect America from Beast Mode Wanda, he uses the Vipers of Valtor spell, which is also from the comics. To escape from Wanda, Strange and America fling themselves rather unceremoniously across the multiverse to many strange realms, including a paint universe, which gives us the whole 2D moment from Inside Out vibes. However, the first world they visited strongly resembled the home of the Living Tribunal. In the comics, the Living Tribunal was a vastly powerful humanoid cosmic entity who has existed for as long as the universe itself. The function of the Living Tribunal is to safeguard the multiverse, which is the total sum of all the universes, from an imbalance of mystical forces. The Living Tribunal's first encounter with an entity from Earth 616 was, you guessed it, with Dr. Stephen Strange. We could not do this video without mentioning the swath of jaw-dropping cameos in Earth 838. We had the introduction of the Illuminati, who are essentially a covert team of the smartest superheroes around who meet in secret, sharing information and strategy. In the comics, Earth 616's Illuminati had mostly the same characters, including Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, and Black Bolt, although the lineup also featured Doctor Strange, Namor, who we're still waiting for in the MCU, and Iron Man. In Earth 838, the lineup instead includes Mordo, Captain Carter, and Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel, the BFF of Carol Danvers and the mother of Monica Rambeau. Speaking of Captain Carter, though, during her ill-fated fight with Wanda, she utters the line,
"I can do this all day."
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately for Captain Carter, though, it turned out that she could not do this all day, as she got severed in half by her own shield as Wanda did her very own impression of Omni-Man in Invincible and wiped out the entire Illuminati with shocking ease. Speaking of that fight, one of the most violent deaths come as Wanda essentially makes Black Bolt obliterate his own brains after removing his mouth in what was likely a Matrix reference. In the comics, Black Bolt is a member of the Inhumans and is part of a reclusive race of genetically altered superhumans who made their live-action debut in the ill-fated series of the same name. However, Black Bolt actor Anson Mount did indeed play the character in both the series and the Multiverse of Madness. John Krasinski plays Reed Richards in the movie, and although it has not been confirmed, it is likely that he'll be playing the character again in the MCU, perhaps alongside his real-life wife, Emily Blunt. Reed Richards mentions his wife in the movie, which is, of course, fellow Fantastic Four member Sue Storm, but he also references his children, Valeria and Franklin Richards, with Valeria, who goes by the moniker Brainstorm, having a genius-level intellect like her father, while Franklin, who goes by the moniker Powerhouse, which is kind of lame, but whatever, he's a powerful reality warper with almost godlike abilities. With them being referenced, don't be surprised if they eventually join the next generation of MCU heroes. Another interesting connection, though, is the one between Reed and Marvel's next big bad, Kang the Conqueror, with Kang, aka Nathaniel Richards, being a descendant of both Reed Richards and Dr. Doom, although it's not quite that simple, and I don't have time to get into all that right now. We got to see the long-awaited introduction of Professor X in the MCU, with the legendary Patrick Stewart reprising his role. Professor X can be seen in his classic green suit and yellow hover chair from the 1997 X-Men animated series. Oh, the nostalgia. But it's not just the Illuminati who have familiar faces, but their robotic security forces as well, with them revealing themselves to be versions of the highly evolved AI, Ultron. Although James Spader doesn't return to voice the drones, the bot who reveals the link to Ultron is voiced by Ross Marquand, who played the character in Marvel's What If. Continuing on with Earth 838, Christine Palmer reveals that the Baxter Foundation is a research group tasked with cataloging and studying the known multiverse. For you Fantastic Four comic book fans, you will know that the Baxter Building is the home of the Fantastic Four, with the Foundation being run by Reed Richards. Going back to Professor X, he tells Doctor Strange, just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean that they're lost forever. This line likely sounds familiar to you, as it was the same line that he said to his younger self back when he had hair and was played by James McAvoy in X-Men: Days of Future Past. Seeing as Wanda's Multiverse of Madness storyline is so connected to WandaVision and the events of Westview, it is unsurprising that there's a couple of callbacks to the Disney Plus series. Of course, her children and the Darkhold are seen in the movie, as well as hers and Vision's house in the show, and during Wanda's first multiverse dream, we can also hear the familiar opening chimes of the WandaVision title credits. Now again, you probably did not miss this one, but during the Illuminati flashback, we saw the body of Thanos lying in the right-hand side of the frame, who the Illuminati defeated in battle. With there being multiple variants of Thanos, perhaps we'll get to see more iterations of the character moving forward. Seeing as Doctor Strange had an important role to play in No Way Home, replacing Tony as Peter Parker's pseudo-father figure, and seeing that Sam Raimi directed the original Spider-Man trilogy, it was no surprise that Spidey and other bug-themed heroes were referenced in Multiverse of Madness, but the best reference has to be the moment when Stephen Strange explains the existence of Spider-Man to a grossed-out America, who asks if he shoots webs out of his butt. This is, of course, a reference to the organic web shooters seen in Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, which were divisive amongst fans at best. Another reference to Spider-Man is the line that Defender Strange says to America in order to justify trying to steal her powers, which echoes the, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means far more than their deaths, a line said by Stephen to Peter in No Way Home. Another neat little Easter egg is the McLeod bookstore that can be seen across the street from the Sanctum Sanctorum. This is likely a reference to Marvel artist Bob McLeod, who's probably best known as the creator of Marvel's New Mutants. Another more harrowing detail comes in the moment Professor X infiltrates Wanda's mind in order to free the trapped version of her before he brutally gets his neck snapped. the other Wanda is found trapped in some rubble while an air raid siren goes off, which suggests that the prison Wanda's subconscious has created is modeled off of the traumatic events of her childhood, where Wanda and her brother Pietro found themselves trapped in the rubble of their family home in Sokovia after being hit by a Stark Industry missile. It also forebodes Wanda's presumed death as she destroys the birthplace of the Darkhold on Mount Wundagore and allows herself to die amongst the rubble. This next one is a little contentious, but the statue that Wanda uses to crush Maria Rambeau's Captain Marvel looks an awful lot like Jocasta. In the comics, the robot Jocasta was built by Ultron so he could have a mate, but she eventually becomes a character in her own right, joining up with the Avengers as a fellow superhero. And finally, we cannot do this video without mentioning the hilarious and meta cameo of Sam Raimi's friend Bruce Campbell. Campbell, who is seen as the Pizza Papa in Doctor Strange 2, cameos in basically all of Raimi's movies, with his Spider-Man trilogy being no exception.